The invitation had arrived 3 months late, forwarded twice, the envelope creased at the corners like an afterthought. She'd held it in her hands that October afternoon, feeling the weight of expensive cardstock, reading her own name in calligraphy that seemed to hesitate, as if the pen had paused before committing her existence to paper. Her sister was getting married. Of course she was. Perfect Vanessa, with her marketing career and her architect fiancé, and her ability to make their mother laugh in that effortless musical way that had always eluded her. She'd debated not going. For weeks, the RSVP card sat on her kitchen counter, gathering coffee rings and grocery lists, while she rehearsed excuses that might sound legitimate. A work conference, a prior commitment, a sudden illness that was tragic, but not so tragic it required follow-up questions. But in the end, she'd checked the box marked "accepts with pleasure" because some part of her, stubborn and hopeful despite decades of evidence, still believed that family meant something, that blood created obligations that worked both ways, that maybe, this time, she'd be allowed to belong. The dress had been an investment she couldn't quite afford, emerald silk that made her feel like someone who deserved to be photographed, someone who might walk into a room and have people turn their heads for reasons other than pity or mild curiosity about what she'd done wrong this time. She'd practiced her smile in the mirror, the one that said she was fine, more than fine, thriving actually, while her bank account quietly disagreed and her studio apartment echoed with the kind of silence that makes you question every choice that led you to being 31 and alone. The wedding venue was one of those restored barns that cost more than most people's homes. All exposed beams and Edison bulbs strung like captured stars, long wooden tables set with wildflowers in vintage bottles, an aesthetic carefully curated to look effortless. She arrived exactly on time, not early enough to seem desperate, not late enough to draw attention, carrying a gift she'd wrapped herself, because paying for professional wrapping felt like admitting she cared too much about impressing people who'd already decided she wasn't worth impressing. The parking lot was already full, guests clustered in groups that had formed naturally, the way water finds its level, people who'd known each other for years, who had inside jokes and shared histories, who belonged. She smoothed her dress, checked her lipstick in the rearview mirror one last time, and stepped into the golden afternoon light that made everything look softer than it was. Inside, the barn had been transformed into something from a magazine spread. All white linens and candlelight, a string quartet playing something classical and vaguely melancholy in the corner. A young woman with a clipboard and an earnest smile approached immediately, the kind of wedding coordinator who'd been hired to make sure everything ran perfectly, which included managing guests who might disrupt the carefully orchestrated timeline. "Name?" she asked, her pen poised over a seating chart that looked like a military operation. "Maya Chen," she said, and watched the coordinator's smile falter, just slightly, just enough. The woman's eyes scanned the chart once, twice, 3 times, her finger tracing invisible lines, while her expression shifted from professional warmth to mild concern to something that looked uncomfortably close to pity. "I'm so sorry," the coordinator said, her voice dropping to that particular register people use when they're about to deliver bad news they didn't personally create but still feel responsible for. "I don't see you on the main seating chart. Let me just—" She pulled out her phone, typing quickly, her thumb moving with the urgency of someone who knew they were about to become part of someone else's family drama. Maya felt her chest tighten, that familiar sensation of the world narrowing, of becoming suddenly visible in all the wrong ways. Other guests were arriving now, being greeted with enthusiasm, directed to tables with names like Sweetheart and Beloved and Forever, while she stood there, an organizational problem to be solved. "Ah, here we are," the coordinator said, her relief audible. "You're at table 18, it's near the back, by the kitchen entrance." I'm sure it was just an oversight. It wasn't an oversight. Maya knew that with the certainty of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading between lines, interpreting silences, understanding that when your family forgets you exist, it's rarely an accident. Table 18 was where you put people you had to invite, but didn't actually want there. The distant cousins, the obligatory plus ones, the reminders of complications you'd rather not address on your perfect day. She thanked the coordinator and made her way through the crowd, weaving between guests who were already holding champagne flutes, their laughter bright and uncomplicated, their presence here unquestioned. Table 18 was exactly where promised. Tucked in a corner where the pretty lighting didn't quite reach, where you could hear the kitchen staff calling orders and the clatter of dishes being arranged. The other seats at the table were empty, not yet filled. Empty. Place cards for people who apparently also existed in that liminal space of being related enough to require an invitation, but not enough to matter. She sat down, arranged her clutch on the table, and tried to look like someone who'd chosen this spot, who preferred the quieter corners, who wasn't fighting back the hot sting of tears that made her mascara feel suddenly precarious. "You okay there?" The voice came from her left, low and kind, with a slight rasp that suggested either too many late nights or too much honest laughter. She turned to find a man sliding into the seat beside her, tall and broad-shouldered in a suit that looked expensive but worn, like he'd owned it for years and had enough confidence not to care if it was perfectly in fashion. His dark hair was slightly too long, falling across his forehead in a way that seemed accidental, and his eyes were warm, the kind of brown that reminded her of autumn and safety and things that don't ask you to be anything other than what you are. "I'm fine," she said automatically, because that's what you say, because admitting otherwise to a stranger felt like handing over ammunition. He glanced at the table number, then back at her, one eyebrow raised slightly. Table 18, the Siberia of wedding seating. I'm guessing we're either estranged relatives or people who RSVP'd late. Despite everything, she felt a small smile tugging at her mouth. I RSVP'd exactly on time. Well, technically late, but only because the invitation arrived late, so I think that's a wash. "Let me guess," he said, settling more comfortably in his chair, turning slightly toward her in a way that suggested genuine interest rather than polite small talk. "Bride's side or groom's side?" "Bride's sister, actually." His expression shifted, something like recognition flickering across his features. He didn't say anything immediately, but the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that acknowledged that some situations were too complicated for glib responses. "Groom's second cousin," he offered finally. "Met him twice. Nice guy. Couldn't pick me out of a lineup." He paused, then extended his hand. "Daniel Rivera." Maya Chen. His hand was warm, his grip firm but not aggressive, the kind of handshake that felt like an anchor. "So, Maya Chen, bride's sister, relegated to table 18, Daniel said, his tone light but his eyes serious. "What's your crime? Did you object at the engagement party? Sleep with the best man? Dare to suggest a cash bar?" She laughed, surprising herself with the sound. "Nothing so dramatic. I just have the unfortunate habit of existing in a way that doesn't fit the narrative." Before he could respond, a small voice piped up from Daniel's other side. "Daddy, is this where we're sitting? I can't see anything from here." Maya leaned forward slightly to see a child, perhaps 7 or 8, with Daniel's dark hair and the kind of large, expressive eyes that seemed to see everything. The girl was wearing a navy dress with small white flowers, tights that had already developed a small run near the ankle, and an expression of polite disappointment. "For now, kiddo," Daniel said, his entire demeanor softening in that particular way parents have when addressing their children. A gentleness that doesn't diminish authority, but transforms it into protection. "But we might relocate for strategic purposes later," What strategic purposes? The girl asked. It means making the best of a weird situation, Maya found herself saying, and the girl's attention swiveled to her immediately, assessing, curious. Are you in a weird situation too? The girl asked with the devastating directness of children who haven't yet learned that some truths are meant to be wrapped in softer language. Sophie, Daniel said gently, a warning and an apology in one word. It's okay, Maya said. Yes, I'm in a weird situation. Sometimes families are complicated. Sophie nodded solemnly, as if this confirmed something she'd already suspected about the universe. My mom died, she announced, with the matter-of-fact tone of someone who'd had to say it enough times that the words had become smooth, like stones worn down by water. So now it's just me and Daddy, and sometimes people look at us weird, like they're sad, but also relieved it's not them. Maya felt her breath catch, not at the revelation itself, but at the raw honesty of it. The way this small person had articulated something Maya had felt her entire life, being the object of other people's relief, that they weren't you. I think, Maya said carefully, meeting Sophie's serious gaze, that people who look at you like that don't know how lucky you are to have each other. Sophie considered this, then nodded, apparently satisfied with the answer. She turned back to her father. Can I go look at the cake? They have it on display, and it's really tall. Daniel glanced around, clocking exits and sightlines with the instinct of a parent who'd learned to calculate risk in real time. Stay where I can see you. Don't touch anything. Be back in 5 minutes. Sophie slipped away, moving through the crowd with the unself-conscious grace of childhood, and Daniel turned back to Maya, something like apology in his expression. Sorry about that. She's going through a phase where she tells everyone about her mom within the first 5 minutes of meeting them. Her therapist says it's her way of controlling the narrative, of saying it before someone else can say it wrong. She's remarkable, Maya said, and meant it. She is, Daniel agreed, pride evident in his voice. She's also the reason I'm here. Marcus, the groom, worked with my late wife years ago. He's been good about staying in touch, checking in, remembering Sophie's birthday. I figured showing up was the least I could do, even if we end up in wedding Siberia. The ceremony was starting, guests being gently herded toward the rows of white chairs arranged in front of an arch dripping with roses and eucalyptus. Maya and Daniel made their way to the back rows, Sophie between them, and Maya tried not to notice how her mother, seated in the front row, in a dress that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, didn't turn around, didn't scan the crowd for her other daughter, didn't seem to register her absence as anything worth noting. Vanessa looked perfect, of course, descending the makeshift aisle in a gown that managed to be both understated and clearly expensive, her hair swept up in an elegant twist, her smile radiant in that particular way brides have when everything is going exactly as planned. Her fiancé, husband now, as of the next few minutes, looked at her like she'd hung the moon personally, and Maya felt something twist in her chest that wasn't quite jealousy, but wasn't not jealousy either. She'd never wanted the big wedding, the production, the performance of it all, but she'd wanted to be seen, to be important to someone in a way that made them look at her like that, like she was the answer to a question they'd been asking their whole lives. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and choosing each other every day, and Maya found herself only half listening. Her attention caught instead by the small, warm weight of Sophie's head as the girl leaned against her arm, tired from the excitement, trusting in that unconscious way children have with people they've decided are safe. Daniel noticed, his expression softening, and for a moment Maya felt part of something, even if it was just the shared experience of being spectators to someone else's happiness. The reception began with that particular chaos of people trying to find their assigned seats, greeting friends, navigating the social geography of who sits where and what that means. Maya returned to table 18, which had filled slightly with people who all seemed to have that same quality of being present, but not quite included. An elderly couple, who turned out to be distant relatives of the groom's family. A single woman in her 40s who worked with Vanessa and seemed quietly uncomfortable, as if she'd realized too late that being invited didn't mean being wanted. A young man who spent most of his time on his phone, clearly wishing he were anywhere else. Daniel and Sophie rejoined her, and somehow their presence made the table feel less like exile and more like refuge. Sophie was chattering about the ceremony, about how pretty the flowers were, about how she'd spotted a dog in the parking lot and had wanted to pet it, but Daddy said they were running late. The elderly couple smiled at her indulgently, and even the uncomfortable woman from Vanessa's work seemed to relax slightly, as if Sophie's innocence was permission to be less guarded. The speeches started during dinner, after plates of carefully plated chicken and salmon had been distributed with the kind of precision that suggested someone had spent months planning the meal timing. The best man told jokes that mostly landed, stories about the groom's college years that were probably funnier if you'd been there. One of Vanessa's friends gave a toast about female friendship that was sweet and slightly generic, the kind of speech that could have been about anyone. Then their mother stood up. Maya felt her stomach drop, that visceral response of recognizing danger before your conscious mind has fully processed the threat. Her mother looked elegant, composed, holding her champagne flute with the ease of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "I'd like to say a few words about my daughter," she began. And even though she was facing the room, Maya knew with cold certainty that this wasn't about celebration. "Vanessa has always been my success story. From the time she was young, she knew what she wanted and went after it with determination and grace. She's built a career, found a wonderful partner, created a life that makes me proud every single day." The words were lovely. The subtext was lethal. Maya felt it in the pause that came next, the slight shift in her mother's posture, the way her gaze swept the room and landed, just for a fraction of a second, on table 18. "As a mother, you hope both your children will find their way. You do everything you can to guide them, to provide opportunities, to show them what's possible." Another pause, another small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. And sometimes one child just shines brighter. It's not about loving one more than the other. It's about recognizing reality. Vanessa understood from an early age that success requires sacrifice, that you can't just drift through life hoping things will work out. You have to make them work out. The implication hung in the air like smoke, that Maya was the drifter, the one who hadn't made things work out, the disappointment that didn't merit mention on her sister's perfect day except as a cautionary tale, an implicit comparison that made Vanessa's achievements more impressive by contrast. Maya felt her face burning. That particular heat that comes from public humiliation, from knowing that everyone in this room was now thinking about her, was filling in the blanks with their own assumptions about why she was the daughter who didn't merit the same pride, the same love, the same acknowledgement of basic human worth. Her mother raised her glass. "To Vanessa and Marcus, may your marriage be everything you've worked for and more." The room erupted in applause and the chime of glasses, and Maya sat frozen, her hands clenched in her lap, her breathing shallow, trying to remember all the techniques her therapist had taught her about staying present, about not disappearing into the shame spiral, about recognizing that other people's cruelty says more about them than about you. She felt a hand on hers, warm and steady. Daniel's fingers closed gently around her clenched fist, not demanding anything, just offering an anchor. "Breathe," he said softly, his voice pitched only for her. "Just breathe. She doesn't get to define you." Sophie, on her other side, had gone very still, her child's intuition telling her that something bad had happened, even if she didn't fully understand the adult complexities of it. She reached for Maya's other hand, her small fingers wrapping around Maya's with surprising strength. "My teacher says," Sophie announced, her voice carrying in that way children's voices do when they're stating something they believe to be universally true, that people who are mean are usually scared of something, and that the bravest thing is to be kind anyway. The elderly couple across the table nodded in agreement, and the uncomfortable woman from Vanessa's work looked at Maya with something like solidarity, and Maya realized that maybe Table 18 wasn't exile. Maybe it was where all the people who saw through the performance ended up, and maybe that wasn't the punishment she'd thought it was. But the damage was done. She could feel eyes on her now, people glancing over with that mixture of curiosity and pity, probably wondering what she'd done to deserve her own mother's public dismissal, probably grateful it wasn't them, probably already forming stories to tell later about the sister who didn't quite measure up. The band started playing, couples taking to the dance floor, and Maya excused herself, mumbling something about needing air, needing the bathroom, needing anything other than sitting there, being the object of whispered speculation. She made her way outside, through a side door that led to a small patio area lit with string lights, where the music was muffled and the night air was cool against her heated face. She pressed her hands against her eyes, trying to push back tears that felt both completely justified and utterly pointless. Crying wouldn't change anything. It never did. Her mother would still believe every word she'd said. Vanessa would still be the favorite, and Maya would still be the one trying to prove she deserved to exist in their orbit, knowing the proof would never be sufficient. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear me out before you decide I'm completely insane." Maya turned to find Daniel standing in the doorway, backlit by the warm glow from inside, his expression serious but not pitying, which somehow made it worse, because pity she knew how to deflect, but genuine concern was harder to armor against. "I don't think you're insane," she said, her voice rougher than she wanted it to be, "but I'm also not in the best place to make that judgment right now." He stepped fully outside, letting the door close behind him, muffling the music to a distant rhythm. What happened in there was cruel. Your mother's speech was cruel. The seating arrangement was cruel. This whole situation is designed to make you feel small, and I don't know you very well, but I know enough to see that you're not small. You're just surrounded by people who need you to be. Why do you care? The question came out more defensively than she intended, but she was tired of pretending, tired of being grateful for scraps of basic human decency, tired of the assumption that she should be thankful anyone noticed her at all. "Because 3 years ago, my wife died in a car accident, and for months afterward, people treated me like I was broken glass. They'd tiptoe around me, speak in soft voices, look at me like I was a tragedy waiting to happen. And the worst part wasn't the grief. The grief was mine. It was real. It was mine to feel. The worst part was how they made me smaller than my grief, like I was just this sad story they could tell to make their own lives feel more stable." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "You're not a sad story, Maya. You're a person who deserves better than this." She didn't know what to say to that, to the raw honesty of it, to the way he'd offered his own pain, not as comparison, but as recognition. "Here's my idea," Daniel continued. "It's probably terrible, and you can absolutely say no, but pretend you're with me for the rest of the night. We're together. Dating, maybe not serious yet, but promising. It gives you a buffer, someone in your corner, and honestly," he smiled ruefully, "it helps me too. People keep asking about Sophie's mom, keep looking at me like I'm some kind of tragic figure, and I'm exhausted from managing their feelings about my life." Maya studied him, looking for the angle, the catch, the hidden cost, but his expression was open, earnest, almost vulnerable in its honesty. "You want to use me as a fake girlfriend to avoid uncomfortable questions. I want to offer you the protection of being seen as part of a pair in a social situation specifically designed to make single people feel inadequate, while also benefiting from that same protection myself," he said. "It's mutually beneficial theater." Despite everything, she laughed. It came out shaky but real, and something in her chest loosened slightly. "That's the most honest proposition I've ever received." "I'm too tired for anything but honesty," he said simply. "So what do you say? Want to help each other survive this wedding?" She should say no, should maintain her dignity, her independence, her refusal to need anyone's help. But dignity hadn't protected her from her mother's speech. Independence hadn't made Table 18 hurt less. And refusing help just because you thought you should be strong enough not to need it was its own kind of prison. "Okay," she said. "Let's do it." His smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of worry and turning him into someone younger, lighter, more hopeful than she'd seen him. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She took a breath, squaring her shoulders. "But I should warn you. My family is exceptionally good at making people feel unwelcome. You might be signing up for more drama than you bargained for." "Maya," he said, and the way he said her name felt significant somehow, like he was choosing to see her rather than just acknowledge her presence. "I have a 7-year-old who once announced at a parent-teacher conference that I sometimes cry in the shower. I can handle drama." They went back inside together, and it was amazing how such a small thing changed everything. Daniel's hand rested lightly on her lower back, a barely-there touch that somehow communicated volumes. "I'm here. I'm with her. She's not alone." They found Sophie at their table, colouring on a napkin with crayons she'd presumably charmed off a server, and when she saw them return together, she grinned with the knowing expression of a child who thinks she understands exactly what's happening. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend now?" Sophie asked Maya directly, no preamble, no social nicety. Maya glanced at Daniel, who gave her a small shrug that said, "Your call." "We're figuring it out," Maya told Sophie, which had the benefit of being true even in its fabrication. "Good," Sophie said, returning to her drawing. "You're nice and you smell good, and you didn't talk to me like I'm a baby." "Sophie," Daniel said with practiced parental mortification. "What?" "It's true. Some people do that. They use that voice like..." Sophie pitched her voice up into an exaggerated sing-song. "Oh, you poor little thing, are you okay? Like being sad makes you stupid." Maya felt something crack open in her chest, some protective wall she'd built between herself and genuine connection. This child, this small person who'd lost her mother and was still navigating a world that didn't always make space for her grief, understood something essential about dignity that most adults couldn't grasp. The band shifted into a slower song, something romantic and sweeping, and couples flooded the dance floor, wrapped around each other in that particular intimacy of public slow dancing that manages to be both performative and genuine. Daniel stood, offered his hand to Maya with theatrical formality. "May I have this dance?" he asked, and there was humor in his voice, but also something more serious beneath it, an invitation that went beyond the immediate moment. She placed her hand in his, let him lead her to the edge of the dance floor where the light was softer, less exposed. His hand found the small of her back again, warm through the silk of her dress, and she rested her hand on his shoulder, feeling the solid reality of him, the way his body was an anchor in a room that had felt dangerously untethered. They swayed rather than danced, moving in approximate time with the music, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy and understated, and feel the steady rhythm of his breathing. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For this. For..." She gestured vaguely, encompassing the dance, the pretense, the kindness of it all. "You keep thanking me," he said, his voice low near her ear. "But I'm getting something out of this too. In the past hour, 3 different relatives have stopped asking me when I'm going to get back out there, which is apparently code for start dating so we can stop feeling uncomfortable about your widowhood." "People are terrible," Maya said. "People are scared," Daniel corrected gently. They don't know what to do with grief, with disappointment, with anything that disrupts their story about how life should work. So they make it smaller, more manageable, more about them. He paused, then continued. Your mother's speech, that wasn't about you. That was about her need to believe that success is controllable, that if she just does the right things and makes the right choices and favors the right child, she can keep chaos at bay. That's a very generous interpretation. It's a realistic one. Generous would be pretending it didn't hurt you. His hand pressed slightly more firmly against her back, a reminder of presence. You're allowed to be hurt by it. She felt tears pricking her eyes again, but different this time, less about shame and more about the strange relief of being seen, of having someone acknowledge the wound without trying to immediately fix it or minimize it or make it about something else. The song shifted, something more upbeat, and couples began to separate, to laugh and twirl and embrace the change in tempo. But Daniel and Maya stayed as they were, moving slowly even as the music picked up, creating their own rhythm that had nothing to do with what the band was playing. Maya? She looked up at him, at the question in his eyes. This is going to sound strange, and maybe it's just the wedding atmosphere, or maybe it's that I've spent 3 years convinced I'd never feel anything like this again, but I'm not pretending right now. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not pretending. Her breath caught. This was dangerous territory, the space between performance and reality, where you could get hurt in ways that fake relationships weren't supposed to allow. Daniel, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know. Whatever happens after tonight, whether this is just 2 people helping each other survive a difficult evening or something more, I want you to know that you're... He paused, searching for words. You're remarkable, not despite what your family thinks, but independently of it. You're kind and strong and real in a way that most people can't manage, and anyone who can't see that is choosing not to look. Before she could respond, Sophie appeared at their side, tugging on Daniel's jacket. Daddy, they're about to cut the cake and I want to see it up close. The moment fractured, returning them to the present, to the reality of the wedding continuing around them. But something had shifted. Some line had been crossed, and as they followed Sophie toward where the towering cake stood, displayed like a monument to Vanessa's perfect day, Maya felt the weight of Daniel's hand still on her back, steady and certain. The cake cutting was exactly what she'd expected. Vanessa and Marcus posed perfectly, the photographer snapping hundreds of photos, capturing every angle of their smiles, and the delicate way they fed each other small bites while everyone applauded. Maya stood at the back of the crowd, Sophie in front of her, Daniel beside her, and told herself it was fine, she was fine, this was fine. "Family photos," the photographer called out, and Maya felt her stomach drop again. That Pavlovian response to knowing she was about to be excluded or included in ways that made the exclusion more obvious. Vanessa's bridal party gathered first, all matching dresses and coordinated bouquets, laughing and arranging themselves in practiced poses. Then extended family began to cluster, cousins and aunts and uncles, people Maya recognized but who'd never bothered to know her beyond obligatory holiday greetings. Bride's immediate family, the photographer called, and Vanessa beckoned to their mother, to Marcus's family, arranging people with the precision of someone who'd planned these exact photos for months. Maya waited for the call, for the bride's sister, for the acknowledgement that she existed in this family, beyond as an object lesson in disappointment. But it didn't come. The photographer snapped away, capturing what would become the official record of this day, the proof of who mattered, and Maya stood outside the frame, watching her mother's arm around Vanessa's waist, watching them smile at each other with uncomplicated joy, watching her own absence become permanent. "That's bullshit," Daniel said quietly, and Maya was surprised to hear anger in his voice, real anger, not on his own behalf, but on hers. "It's fine," she said automatically. "No, it's not. He looked at her, his expression fierce. "Maya, I know we just met, and I know I don't have the full context of your family dynamics, but that is deliberately cruel. You're her sister, you're their daughter, and they're erasing you from the official record of this day." "They've been erasing me for years," Maya heard herself say. "This is just more visible." The photographer was moving on to other groupings now. Friends of the couple, college roommates, people who'd come together for this celebration of love and commitment and belonging. Maya turned away, ready to return to the safety of Table 18, to the exile she at least understood. "No," Daniel said, catching her hand. "I have an idea, and you can absolutely veto it, but let's take our own photos. Right now, you, me, Sophie, let's document that you were here, that you existed at this wedding, that you're not defined by their refusal to see you." "Daniel, that's necessary," he finished. "It's necessary. Not for them, for you. You deserve to have proof that you showed up, that you tried, that you were present for your sister's day, even when she couldn't be bothered to acknowledge it." Sophie, who'd been quietly absorbing the adult tension, nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and we can do silly faces too, not just serious ones. I'm really good at silly faces." So they did. They found a corner with good light, near the floral arrangements that had cost someone's entire month's rent, and they took photos. Daniel held his phone out, and they crowded together, Sophie in the middle, Maya and Daniel flanking her, and they smiled. Sophie made faces. They laughed at her expressions. Daniel took a photo of just Maya and Sophie, the two of them with their heads together, Maya's arm around the little girl's shoulders. And then Sophie insisted on taking one of Maya and Daniel alone. "You have to look at each other," Sophie directed with the authority of someone who'd seen enough movies to know how romance worked. "And smile like you have a secret." They looked at each other, and Maya felt something shift in her chest, something that had been tightly closed beginning to open. Daniel smiled at her, and she smiled back, and maybe it was the champagne or the emotional exhaustion or the strange alchemy of a fake relationship becoming startlingly real, but she felt for the first time that entire evening like she existed in a way that mattered. The reception continued, descending into that particular chaos that happens when open bars meet family gatherings, meet deeply held resentments finally being given voice. Maya watched from their table as distant relatives grew louder, as the dancing became more enthusiastic and less coordinated, as Vanessa's perfect day began to show signs of wear around the edges. Her mother approached as Maya was returning from the bathroom, cornering her near the bar where the lighting was less forgiving, and the noise provided convenient cover for conversations that couldn't be had in public. "I saw you," her mother said without preamble, "with that man. The one with the child. His name is Daniel," Maya said, keeping her voice even, "and his daughter is Sophie. It's a bit desperate, don't you think? Latching onto the first man who shows you attention?" Her mother's smile was thin, sharp. "I suppose I should be grateful you're finally attempting some kind of social life, though a widower with a child is quite the project to take on." Maya felt something inside her crystallize. All the years of accepting this treatment, of internalizing the criticism, of trying to be smaller and more acceptable and less of a disappointment, hardening into something clear and unbreakable. "I'm not having this conversation with you," she said. Her mother's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "I said I'm not doing this. I'm not listening to you tear apart my choices, my life, or anyone I care about. I came to this wedding because I hoped, despite substantial evidence to the contrary, that family meant something to you, that I meant something to you. But your speech made it clear where we stand, and I'm done pretending that if I just try hard enough, if I just change enough, you'll suddenly see me as someone worth loving." "Maya, you're being dramatic." "I'm being honest. And I understand that honesty makes you uncomfortable because it disrupts the story you've told yourself about why one daughter succeeded and the other didn't. But here's what you don't understand. Vanessa isn't successful because she's better than me. She's successful because you invested in her, you believed in her, you created opportunities for her, and then congratulated her for taking them. Me? You put obstacles in my path and then criticized me for struggling to overcome them. Her mother's face had gone pale, then red, anger and something that might have been shame, fighting for dominance. I will not be spoken to this way, especially at your sister's wedding. Then don't speak to me at all, Maya said, and the words came out steady, certain, final. I'm done. I'm done being your cautionary tale, your example of what not to be, your proof that you're a good mother because at least one daughter turned out right. I deserve better than this. I deserve a family that sees me, that respects me, that treats my presence as something other than an inconvenience to be managed. She walked away before her mother could respond, before the tears that were threatening could fall, before the anger could crack into the grief beneath it. She made it outside again, to the same patio where she'd stood earlier, where Daniel had first offered his improbable help. And she let herself feel it, all of it, the loss and the rage and the strange, fierce relief of finally saying the truth out loud. Maya, Daniel's voice, cautious, concerned. She turned to find him standing in the doorway, Sophie holding his hand, both of them looking at her with matching expressions of worry. I confronted my mother, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. I told her I was done accepting her treatment, and then I walked away. Daniel's expression shifted from concern to something like pride. How do you feel? Terrified, she admitted, and free. Mostly terrified. Sophie let go of Daniel's hand and walked over to Maya, looking up at her with those impossibly perceptive eyes. My daddy says that being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you're scared, but you do the right thing anyway. Maya crouched down so she was eye level with Sophie. Your daddy is very smart. I know, Sophie said matter-of-factly. Are you going to stay for the rest of the wedding, or are you going to leave? Because if you leave, can we come with you? It's kind of boring in there now, and I think Daddy wants an excuse to go. Maya looked up at Daniel, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Sophie's not wrong. We've made our appearance. We've eaten the expensive chicken, and I think we've fulfilled our social obligations. If you wanted to leave, we could leave. Together. Get away from this whole situation. You don't have to do that, Maya said, standing. I don't want to ruin your evening. Maya, Daniel interrupted gently, you're not ruining anything. You're giving us an excuse to escape a wedding we were only at out of obligation. And honestly, I'd much rather spend the rest of the evening getting to know you than making small talk with people who barely remember I exist. Where would we go? There's a diner about 2 miles from here, Sophie piped up. We passed it on the way. It has those really good milkshakes with the whipped cream and the cherry on top. Daniel smiled. Sophie's priorities are clearly in order. What do you say? Want to trade this reception for diner food and milkshakes? Maya thought about staying, about returning to table 18, about enduring the rest of the evening watching her sister's happiness while being reminded of her own inadequacy. Then she thought about sitting in a diner booth with Daniel and Sophie, about conversations that didn't require performance, about the simple pleasure of being wanted rather than tolerated. Yes, she said. Let's go. They gathered their things quietly, avoiding the main areas where Vanessa and the wedding party were still celebrating, making their way to the parking lot, where the night air was cool and clear, where the music from inside was muffled to something almost pleasant. Daniel had driven separately from his extended family, a practical SUV that showed signs of regular use by a child, a car seat in back, coloring books on the floor, that particular organized chaos that spoke of a life being actively lived. Sophie claimed the back seat, buckling herself in with practiced efficiency while Maya slid into the passenger seat, the leather cool against her bare arms. Daniel started the engine, and they pulled out of the parking lot, leaving the restored barn and its Edison bulbs and its carefully curated impermanence behind. The diner was exactly as promised, a chrome and neon throwback that seemed to exist outside of time, where the booths were vinyl and slightly cracked, where the menu was laminated and extensive, where the waitress called everyone Hon and refilled coffee without being asked. They slid into a corner booth, Sophie immediately claiming the window seat, Maya across from her, Daniel beside his daughter. "Okay," Sophie announced, studying the menu with intense concentration. "I'm getting a chocolate milkshake and French fries. That's a meal." "That's definitely not a meal," Daniel said, but there was no real conviction in his voice. "It is at a diner at 9 o'clock at night after a boring wedding," Sophie countered. "Those are the rules." The waitress appeared and they ordered a chocolate milkshake and fries for Sophie, a burger and a vanilla shake for Daniel, a club sandwich and tea for Maya because she needed something to ground her, something normal and mundane after the surreal disaster of the evening. "So," Daniel said once the waitress had departed, leaning back against the booth with his arms stretched along the back of the seat, "you confronted your mother. How are you feeling now that the adrenaline is wearing off?" Maya considered the question, checking in with herself, cataloguing the emotional landscape. "Shaky, relieved, afraid I made things worse. Proud that I finally said something. Guilty for saying it at Vanessa's wedding, even though she's been complicit in how they treat me. Exhausted from feeling all of this at once." "That's a lot of feelings," Sophie observed. "My therapist says it's okay to have lots of feelings at the same time. She says feelings are like weather. They come and they go, and sometimes there's a thunderstorm and a rainbow at the same time." "Your therapist sounds very wise," Maya said. "She is. She has a dog that sits in her office during our sessions, and one time the dog farted really loud and we both pretended it didn't happen, which made it funnier." Daniel laughed, the sound rich and genuine, and Maya found herself laughing too, the absurdity of it all. Escaping her sister's wedding to sit in a diner with a widower and his precocious daughter, discussing therapy and feelings and flatulent office dogs. Their food arrived, and they ate with the unself-conscious comfort of people who decided that formality no longer mattered. Sophie dipped her fries in her milkshake, which Daniel pretended to be horrified by, but which Maya tried and found surprisingly good. They talked about everything and nothing. Daniel's work as an architect, Maya's job at a non-profit that never quite had enough funding, but made her feel like she was contributing something meaningful to the world. Sophie's second-grade teacher who was strict but fair and who'd recently gotten engaged, which Sophie had opinions about. "She said yes right away," Sophie reported, "which I think means she really loves him. Because if you're not sure, you probably shouldn't get married. That's what my friend Jasmine's mom said when she got divorced." "Sophie has very firm opinions about relationships," Daniel said to Maya, his tone amused but also slightly apologetic. "I think Sophie's opinions are valid," Maya said. "Being sure matters, and too many people get married because it seems like the right next step, not because they actually want to spend their lives together." "Like the bride and groom tonight?" Sophie asked with devastating directness. "Sophie," Daniel started, but Maya held up a hand. "It's okay. Honestly, I don't know if Vanessa loves Marcus or loves the idea of Marcus, of having the perfect wedding and the perfect marriage and checking all the boxes that prove she's successful. I hope she loves him. I hope they're happy, but I also think she's more invested in the performance of happiness than the actual feeling." "That's sad," Sophie said simply. "It is," Maya agreed. They stayed at the diner for nearly 2 hours, the conversation flowing easily, punctuated by Sophie's observations and questions, by Daniel's thoughtful responses, by Maya's gradual relaxation into the realization that this was what connection felt like, not performative, not transactional, not contingent on being someone other than who you were, just present, mutual, real. Eventually, Sophie began to yawn, her energy finally depleting, and Daniel announced it was time to get her home. They paid the check, Daniel insisted despite Maya's protests, and walked back out into the parking lot, where the night had grown cooler, where the stars were visible away from the city lights. "Where are you parked?" Daniel asked, and Maya realized with a start that she'd left her car at the wedding venue, had been so focused on escape that she hadn't thought through the logistics. I left my car at the barn," she admitted. "I didn't really think this through." "We'll take you back," Daniel said immediately. "It's on our way home anyway." The drive back was quieter, Sophie dozing in the back seat, the radio playing softly, something indie and melancholic that suited the mood. Maya watched the landscape pass, suburban streets giving way to the more rural road that led to the venue, and felt the evening condensing into something significant, something that would mark a before and after in her life. The parking lot was still half full when they arrived, the wedding still going, though it had clearly entered that late-night phase where only the most dedicated partiers remained. Maya could see through the windows that the dancing had become more chaotic. The energy shifted from performative elegance to genuine release. Daniel pulled up next to her car, an older sedan that she maintained carefully because replacing it wasn't in the budget, and put the SUV in park but didn't turn off the engine. Sophie stirred in the back, but didn't fully wake, making a small sound of protest before settling again. "So," Daniel said, and the single word held so much. Question, possibility, uncertainty, hope. "So," Maya echoed. "I know we started this evening as a mutually beneficial arrangement," Daniel continued, his hands still on the steering wheel, his gaze forward rather than on her, which somehow made it easier to hear what he was saying. "But somewhere between table 18 and French fries dipped in milkshakes, it became real for me. You became real for me. Not as a convenient escape from awkward questions, but as someone I genuinely want to know, to spend time with, to—" He paused, took a breath, finally turned to look at her. "I'd like to see you again. For real. Not pretend, not as protective coloration at a wedding, but because I think you're remarkable, and I haven't felt this way since before Sarah died. And it's terrifying, but also maybe the first thing in 3 years that's made me feel like the future might hold something other than just managing grief." Maya felt her heart hammering, felt the weight of the question, the risk of it, the impossibility of knowing if this was real or just the emotional intensity of a shared difficult experience creating false intimacy. "I live an hour away," she said, "because logistics mattered, because hope without practical consideration was just fantasy." "I have a daughter and a life that's complicated," Daniel countered, "and I'm still figuring out how to be a person and not just a grieving widower and a father. My family is a disaster, and I'm probably going to need a lot of therapy to unpack the damage from tonight alone," Maya added. "I'm already in therapy," Daniel said. "Sophie and I both are. We can recommend someone good." Despite everything, Maya laughed. "Is this how adults date now? By listing all our complications up front?" "I think it might be," Daniel said, and now he was smiling too, that transformation of his face that made him look younger, more hopeful. "But here's the thing. I don't need you to be uncomplicated. I don't need you to be perfect or easy or without baggage. I just need you to be willing to try, to see where this goes. To have coffee next weekend, maybe dinner the weekend after, to let Sophie get to know you because she already likes you and her approval is harder to earn than mine." "What if it doesn't work?" Maya asked, because someone had to voice the fear. "Then it doesn't work," Daniel said simply. "And we'll have had coffee and some nice conversations, and Sophie will have had a chance to meet someone kind who treats her like a person. But what if it does work? What if we're standing here talking ourselves out of something that could actually be good because we're scared of being disappointed? Maya looked at him, at the hope and fear in his expression, at the vulnerability of asking for something he couldn't control, and felt something in her chest make a decision before her brain had fully processed the implications. "Coffee next weekend," she said. "And you should know, I'm a terrible cook. I work too much because it's easier than having a social life, and I'm probably going to overthink every text message you send me because I'm not used to people meaning what they say. I make dinner,